Hello, everyone. It is Robert. It is 11 o'clock on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon in March. I kind of wish it was a little warmer, not going to lie. I kind of wish it was a lot warmer, not going to lie. Getting a little tired of this, but I think we all are too. Welcome. We are here today with Docusign. This is Docusign, the workshop that we have every Tuesday, the beginning of Tech Tuesday. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And we're going to be getting started here with just a moment. We're going to go over how to do some really cool things in Docusign with PDFs. That's what we're going to be focusing on today specifically. So you'll notice that I have a little bit of a new look here going on. Underneath the window, which is kind of over that way, I guess. Yeah, down there, right down there. There's a little scrolling ticker with my contact information. So this way you can kind of jot that down while we're working. We are on Facebook Live, we are on Zoom, and we are also up on YouTube. We're everywhere. So if you have any questions, feel free on the Facebook to go ahead and pop in a chat. Come on into the Zoom room if you'd like to join me. The Zoom room is kwtech.tv.com. And of course, on our YouTube channel, it's kwtechtube.com. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about Docusign PDFs today. All right. So what I have right here in front of you is I'm in a room. I just opened up a brand new room and I called it PDF training. And it's specifically so that I can show you some of the, what I consider to be not so best practices, but I understand why we would need to do this. When you are working on a room, you may encounter a situation where you have a PDF version of a document or form that you need to kind of send out for signature. And that is totally fine. When we have the only copy that we have is a PDF, we don't have a form to fill out. I get it. So we need to be able to work with those. So that's what we're going to focus on. Notice that all I have in my room right now in the documents area are PDFs. So I've got a bunch of different little PDFs here, and they're all from we got some from the KW463 library, 3 of those, and I've got 2 from the NHAR library. Now, these are not the same forms. That what we would do is go up here and click Add, and then go to Docusign Forms and grab, or even for that matter, go to Zip Forms if we're dealing with main forms. These are not those. As a matter of fact, let me bring in to show you the difference between these. So I'm going to bring in the COVID form just so that you can see this one example here. Where's the COVID form? There it is. So I'll bring the COVID form and we'll bring that into the document area here. So after a second, it's going to load up. It's going to look the same as the COVID form that is off to the right of it here when we load it up. But you'll notice the icons. If I go to, switch to a larger view here, you see that the form that I just brought in from the Docusign library has a green icon and it says form. And the one that I have here, the NHAR COVID addendum down at the bottom, that says PDF. It's a little red icon. So the first question you might be asking yourself is, Robert, well, where did you get those? Where did you get those PDFs? How did they get in here when we have the ability to go to the forms area? Well, I actually have, on my desktop, well, on my computer anyway, I have a folder for all of the forms that are available as forms in Docusign, and I had printed them as PDFs. Now, the reason I did that was to show this process and also to have a side load, if you will, of all of the documents that are available in Command and in Docusign to have as a packet, to have as completely separate. So I have a folder full of those. To make those documents, what I did was I brought in every document that was available. And when I brought them in, I went ahead and printed those documents from the rooms here. So that's how I got those into a PDF form. So now I have blank PDFs. So what is the difference between a PDF form and a regular form? So briefly, it comes down to this. A Docusign form, a zip form, a form has pre-fillable or fillable fields. And you can see here, when I open up the COVID form, it has these boxes already loaded on here. And all I need to do as the agent is wherever those boxes are editable here, I can edit them and put some values in. And then when I save and close this document has been pre-filled using those tools inside of a form. PDFs, on the other hand, don't have that. So if I open up the PDF version of this form, you can see that there is a bunch of blank lines here. They look like it's a form, but there's no place for me to put in any of the information here. There's nothing that I can load into this, okay? So I'm clicking all over the place. There's nothing for me to do. I can't check off any boxes, nothing like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on using these PDFs, and we're going to put the boxes on there. We're going to put the fields. We're going to put the signatures on here, but we have to do them manually. And when you see even one of these simple forms, how much work it takes to do these manually, you're going to figure out pretty quickly that the best way to go is to use the pre-designated forms from the form library and not the PDFs. But that doesn't mean that every time you encounter a PDF or something that you need to fill out, let's just back it down to that. It means that there are times when some of these things that you need to fill out don't exist as forms. So we need to make sure that we can do that. So that's what we're going to do. So let's start by taking something really fairly simple here. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to grid view. And we're going to take a little one-time showing. So I'm going to open up this. This is a KW form, not a NAR form. And you can see we have a date, property, seller. We've got all this stuff here. And we need to make some modifications to this, but we can't do it here. So how do we do this? All right, so let's look at this. There are steps that you need to take to be able to edit these PDFs, and they are generally speaking the same steps that you would need to take if they were forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a form so that you can see the difference between a PDF and a form right away. So I'm going to take this NHAR COVID-19. I'm going to right click it and I'm going to create an envelope, okay? Because I want you to see what a form does, and then we'll see what the PDF does. So I create an envelope. It's going to open up an envelope for me. And here's the document. Here's my envelope name. And this one will be real form. And that's the form from the library. And I'm going to come down here, and this is where things change immediately. If I hit add recipient, because this is a Docusign form, it already knows that there are fields on that form that are going to be filled out by the seller, the buyer, the agent, or whoever. The form knows this. So what we're going to use is pre-tagged roles to tell the form who is in what role. So buyer 1, we need to put in here that there is the name of the buyer. And since this is let's play this around as if this was a listing, okay? I would come down here to seller 1 and take my seller and put them into that slot. Now what I'm doing is I'm matching up John Morgan with the role of seller 1, and then the document is going to know where seller 1 needs to sign because of those pre-tagged roles. So I don't have a seller 2, so there's no seller 2 to add, so there's only one person, seller 1. Now if I was sending this out to all people, they would be brought into the room and they would be here, but they're not. So I'll go ahead and hit add selected. And then it says John Morgan is the recipient and he is listed as seller 1. So this is going to match up John with those fields. So let's look at what happens when we're in the fillable area or the sending area of the form. The system knows that John is going to need to fill these out, and it's already put his name in here. All right. It's also got down at the very bottom, the signature and the date signed. So these are the things that we would need to do. Now, in the case of this, you'll see that I don't have the ability to put an effective date in here. I mean, I could add in the date field here. We'll put in a date, not a date signed field, but well, I guess we could put the effective date. Sure, why not? So we'll put the date signed right here. So I can bring that field out, okay? We're going to do the same kind of thing with a PDF, all right, where we don't have fillable fields. But this is what we can do on a regular form. Then I can go ahead and send it. So that's what a regular form does, is brings in to the signature areas all of the required signature parts, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and discard this, and we're going to go back now and do the same thing with a PDF, because I want to show you, once again, the most important difference between those two documents, types of documents. So here is the COVID form that we've just looked at. Now let's look at the PDF version. The PDF version has no boxes here for me to fill out. There's nothing here. So we need to add all of those. So we're going to go ahead and right click this document in the window here. And we're going to say create envelope, just like we did before. And here's where we see our first difference. So this one is PDF. And down here where we see add recipient, take a good look here. Add recipient does not have the option to bring in a pre-tagged role because there's nothing on the document, the PDF, that the system recognizes as a place for seller 1, seller 2, agent, all that, nothing. So we have to add room participants on PDFs. So we'll say room participant, John Morgan, we're going to bring him in. We know his role is seller 1. The PDF doesn't know where to put those. Only a form does. But we're going to bring John Morgan in as seller 1, and we're going to say add selected. So here he is, just like it looks exactly the same, but you'll notice that there's no role above it. It doesn't say seller 1. It's just somebody in the room, which is going to, on the next page, make more sense. So on this page, we do have John Morgan, and we know that he is going to be signing the document. But now we need to add all of the fields, including all of the signature fields and everything. So we have a lot of work to do here. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is say here, the purchase and sales agreement with an effective date of, and then we'll go on the left-hand side here, and we'll kind of ask ourselves, are we looking at a date signed, or are we looking at a date, just date field? So it's important to know that and kind of understand the difference, because when we look at the way that these fields are built, if we choose date signed, if I drop that out here, that's going to put in the date this document was signed by John Morgan. But see, that may not be the same as the purchase and sales agreement with an effective date of. So date signed may not be the appropriate field when we're talking about something like this. So we may end up needing to bring out a text box and put in the date here. The date on the right-hand side, when we bring that box out, we have a whole slew of formatting options. So one of the things we can do is go in here and let's say the date on for the purchase and sales was 3/01/22. Now I'm only making up a date here. I'm not trying to be anything consistent with what's going on. So we can put a date in here for that. Okay. Now the next question is, who's actually filling this out? Because do we need the person who is signing this agreement to fill this information out? Or do we need us as the agent to fill this out? Or do we need this just to be visible on the document for them? So let's kind of look at these options and think about this. When I bring this date field out, I'm effectively bringing it out and saying that this is a field that John Morgan should be filling out. And when I fill out the date here, I'm kind of filling it out for him because the colors match John Morgan's requirement here for his colors. The field is for him, and I'm putting a text value in there. Is that what I want to do? Do I want John to be able to adjust this date, or do I want John to be able to see the date just as if it was text on the page and not be able to adjust it? It's just informational for him, and he's going to see the rest of this information. Or does he need to fill it out? So let's take a look. I'm going to leave this up here for a moment, okay? I'm going to leave that right here. I'm going to make the text box a little smaller and kind of sit it here. Now remember, this is information that John will be able to change because this is attached to John Morgan because we got that field from the John Morgan's standard fields. What if I don't want John to fill it out? What if I want to fill it out and I want him to be able to see it, but I don't want him to be able to do any edits on it? Check it out. On the left, we know that any of these standard fields that are colored the same as John Morgan in the list here are going to be fields that he can edit. If we want to add a field that the person that we're having sign the document cannot edit, we don't want them to edit it, we're going to come over here to the far left, and instead of picking John Morgan with all these gold colored fields, we're going to click on the little pencil icon at the bottom called Pre-Fill Tools. Now this Pre-Fill Tools option allows me to bring out text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, bring out a name field, a company field, or a line used for line outs. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to bring this little text field out here. I'm going to put it right next to the text field that we had created for the date. Okay. So now notice the difference. This one here is a field that John can edit and change the value. This one here will be a field that I can edit right now. I'll put the date of 03/20/22. All right. I'm going to put these side by side right next to each other. Okay. So now these two fields are very different because John, again, this is a field for him. And this field on the pre-fill tools is a field that I can use to fill out the document. So where it says here, the next line, the by and between who? So is it me, Robert Vincent, or is it somebody else? Now, I want to be very, very clear here. In no way am I suggesting that I know what should be on this document. I am not a real estate agent. And so anything that I place in here is not according to any rules. I'm just using it for demonstration purposes. So maybe I want to put in here some text. So I can drag another text box out here. And I can put in here Robert Vincent, Realtor. So I can put in whatever I need. And that is information that will fill out in this box. And it will be visible to John Morgan, but he will not be able to edit it. So once again, information that I can add to the document to put it in there as the agent or put it in there as part of the contract or the agreement. And this person who is signing it won't have any edit capabilities. It's just text. So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and drop down a little bit further here. And I want to observe these check boxes. If checked, buyer and seller agree. And then this one here goes on to say what it says. If I want to put a checkbox here as an option for them, I can do that. I can do that by doing one of two things. If I bring the checkbox out from the gray pre-fill tools, John will not be able to put a checkbox here. Because remember, the pre-fill tools are for you as the agent to put additional information on the document, but the person signing it will not be able to do any edits here. So we don't want this to be a pre-fill object. We want this to be associated with John Morgan. So back to our little list on the left of all of our options. We have the little icons here where we're looking right now at pre-fill tools. If we come back up here to standard fields, in this area here for a regular checkbox, I can come down and find checkbox in the list, drag it out, and place it on the box where I want John to be able to make the determination of checking it or not. Okay? So when we talk about checkboxes, you'll notice that when I put that in here, I think I can zoom in a little bit on this here. Nope, it's not going to go as far as I want. This thing here, let's see if I can go a little bit more. Let's do fit to width. I don't even know what the fit to width is. Nope. Fit to width. Good enough. So with this box here, there's a little border around it, and then there's also a little plus symbol. What that means is if I add a box by clicking that plus symbol there, and I can add as many as I want, okay? What I'm basically saying is that they have to choose one, in this case, one of the three boxes. They will not be able to choose each box independently. And so it's grouped together and it creates a this, that, or. So this is going to give you that option of doing this, that, or. If you are selecting one of those boxes, you can hit delete and it will take away those extra options all the way back down to removing the last one. So remember, you're always going to start off with one. To add a linked checkbox, click the plus symbol, and you can add another one. Click the one of the ones that you don't need, and then click delete, and it will get rid of it and bring it back down to just the one. So if this checkbox needs to be an option box here where it's one or the other, you'll notice that when you click that second box, you can actually drag the second box to another position. So if you needed it to be this one, number 2, or this one, number 3, pick one. This little grouping box indicates that these two are connected together. So you can put that checkbox anywhere that you want that checkbox to be, and it's part of the group. It's going to be an if or, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and remove both of these, and we're going to talk about another option. So we have the checkbox. We can also use radio buttons. Now, radio buttons kind of function in the same way. Typically, they're used in radio button options as opposed to checkbox squares. So I'm going to move this off to the side here, and you notice that I can move independently the two of them. And again, when you click one of these radio buttons, you will not be able to click the other, okay? So these fields are also marked, and we'll go to the right side now, as we have the ability to specify them as required or read-only. Now that same rule applies to checkboxes that we bring out. We have the ability to specify them as read-only, or we can do the option there, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of these. And remember, once again, these things are floating, so we can move them around to wherever they need to be and put them on there. So all of these different fields that we have drop-downs where we can specify values in a drop-down. So maybe I wanted to have them be able to pick specific values for days. So postpone the closing date by X amount of days to accommodate unforeseen circumstances. So I can put select this here, and I can click over on the click over on the formatting, or actually here's the list right here. Options under list or series. I can click add an option for this. So we'll say add option. So let's say 1 to 5 days. Or we can add another option for 6 to 10 days. Okay. So you can put a single value, you can put a range here, whatever it needs to be. And you can also select the default value for when they see it. So 1 to 5 here, this one will show by postpone the closing date by 1 to 5 days to accommodate unforeseen circumstances. Okay. So this gives them the option when they're viewing it to select 1 to 5 or 6 to 10. And we've specified those values over here on the right. Okay. All right. So let's, go through a couple more of these things here and see what some of these fields are. So we know we have a signature field. Let's come down here. I'll go ahead and put a signature field in the seller column here. And one of the things that does not happen by default is just because I've put the signature field, it does not automatically bring the date field out here. So what we want to do is we want to bring out the date field. Now this one requires the date below it. So we'll put the date signed right here. So we have the seller and the date signed. So you can bring out as many people as you have in the room. You can bring out signature fields and all these different fields for each one of those people. Make sure that you're always switching between people if you've got multiple people in the room so that you put them in the right spots here. Now the date signed field in this case is going to be automatic because that field will fill itself out based on when this person signs this document. The signature field, however, they will have the option to fill that out. Okay. So with those two out of the way, let's take a look at some of the other fields that we have here. We have an initial field. So if we do require an initial, we can also put an initial field out here. So that can be at the bottom of any page, and especially for documents of multiple pages, you may want to have an initial field. In most of the documents that require that, there is a little section at the bottom for initials to indicate that it requires initials on each of the pages. Okay. All right, let's come back over here. We have a name field. So if we want to have the name of a person here, this is going to be the full name of John Morgan. You will not need to type anything out here because when you bring this document or bring this field out, it will automatically pull from the person who you associated with, John Morgan. So the full name field is great for areas of a document where you're going to be putting a name of someone here between the buyer and the seller. So the buyer and seller for this property. So between Robert Vincent Realtor, buyer, and so-and-so seller. So let's go ahead and put the name out here. So we would be able to put the name on this line. And now, this kind of, because of the way that it's sitting here, this can get a little tight. So one of the things that we can do is we can use the formatting options on the right-hand side. So if you feel like the document is getting a little bit tight and the names are crowding on each other, you can use the formatting over here and you can adjust not only the font style, so you can choose like an Arial narrow font, and you can see that it reflects in the field that we're working with. And you can also reduce the font size if necessary, down to, in this case, 7%. Or 7 pixels, I believe. Yeah. So you can change, and you can also change the font settings or the formatting for the document, for the fields that we bring out, the pre-fill tool. So I can go down to Arial, Narrow, and 7 here, and again, make this fit. So don't be afraid to work with the fit of these fields on this document so they kind of sit where you need them to sit and look the way you want them to look, okay? All right, so formatting options are available. We also have, if you need an email, that's going to be tied to the seller, or in this case, whoever we bring out here, it's going to be tied to their email, the one, in this case, John Morgan. So remember that it's always tied to the person that we're working with. Now, most of these other things, you don't necessarily need company and title, although they are available there. But remember, the only way that those are going to automatically populate is if that information is already in the details area. Otherwise, they would have to put this information in. It would ask for them to enter the name of a company or enter the title for a position. Okay, so text boxes are not signatures. They are just boxes that you can add text onto a document. This is where the user, the signer, can add text. Remember that? That's the same as this date box that we used over here. We used a text box as the date. So remember, this is for the individual. We're only talking about documents that are for the individual who's going to sign it. We have a payment item. I don't know if anybody's using that, but if you are, you can bring that in here. You can also bring in drawings, formulas, attachments, notes, approvals, and declines. Not a lot of these are being used, quite frankly, but if you do need any of those, they are available and you can grab them from the left here. Okay. So now that we have, we're not going to go through every single thing here because I want to get through a couple of different documents and show you some of the things that we can do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send this document out. Okay. So I'm going to send it because this particular client, John Morgan, I have an email set up for this person. So we're going to bring that to them and send it out. So I'll go ahead and click send here. And off it goes. Okay, so now that is waiting for others to sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into John Morgan's email here. And there we go. It's showing correctly. Good. So I'm going to log into John Morgan's email. And we now see there is a please Docusign here for this. And we'll click on that and we will review this document. And it's going to open it up in a window for the user to see this Docusign. So I'll go ahead and say, okay, we'll sign it just as if they were signing it themselves. We'll click continue here. And so now look what we have here. When we look at, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this so we can kind of focus on what we talked about. Here is in the red box, a field that was a text box, and John has the ability to change the date on here because this is something that we added in his name. Whereas the pre-filled fields that we added, which were uneditable, these were not things that he was going to be able to edit. Those are automatically kind of locked in. So over here we have John Morgan. We brought that name in and it automatically populated the name of the recipient here. We don't have the ability to edit that. That's different from the text boxes. The name field is different. So here's another one. This is the Robert Vincent Realtor. This was a pre-fill. So these ones are stuck on here and he can't make those edits. Now, one of the things that I didn't do is I put the seller signature boxes on there and the date boxes, but I ended up taking them off for when we were demonstrating it. So here we forgot to add in the seller signature and the seller date, but that's okay. Because this is a PDF, I'm going to go ahead and finish this out. There's no signature required. So I'll go ahead and say no thank you to that. And it's going to say you're finished signing it. And what I'll do is I'll come back now to Docusign. And here we are waiting for PDF. Now notice this really hasn't been signed yet because this particular document didn't need to get any signatures. It says needs to sign here, but there was no actual signatures. Okay. So we do have the option of correcting it if we wanted to correct some things here. And if we click on correct, let's see, is it going to open it up? It probably won't open it up because right now it's still kind of in progress. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and void this missing signature. And we're going to do another version of sent state. It is in the sent state, not in the sent state. Okay. We'll leave that alone. Completed. There we go. Let's see what it comes back as. Signed. There you go. All right. Let's go back to our documents area. And this time we're going to do that same one. Now you'll notice that we have the signed version here. Okay. This is the COVID-19 addendum. And we also have the original that we were working with, the PDF. Let's take a look at the original for a second. What do you think is going to be on here in terms of fields? Nothing. The original PDF that we took into an envelope did not add all those fields. Those fields were not permanently added to this PDF. So we would have to do this again if we wanted to do a PDF one, which is another reason why we want to use forms whenever possible. The signed version here of that PDF that came back has the date that he edited here, our date that we were made uneditable, and the fields that we put in here that were also uneditable, and we are missing the signature here. So what do? We forgot to have John sign. Quick little show of hands here. How many of you think that we should take the signed document back into an envelope, which is, by the way, not signed, it's just got some data on it. Should we bring this one back into an envelope? Should we start fresh with the original PDF, which just has nothing on it? Or would we lean towards using the forms that we can edit and know that it'll retain the information? The last two is kind of a trick question. So the reality is it doesn't matter, because what we're trying to do is get a properly signed document. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the original PDF, and we're going to put it back into an envelope, and we're going to add all the goodness, all the bells and whistles. So we're going to put everything in here. Now remember, in the PDF, we don't have pre-tagged roles, so I'm going to go Room Participants, and I'm going to select John Morgan and add him to the document. John Morgan is added to the document. It's under the Needs to Sign automatically. We'll click Next. And let's go top to bottom. So in the top to bottom, we know that there's going to be a date in here, and we've decided that we do not want John to edit it. So we're going to use a pre-fill, and we're going to put that in here and drop it in. And we are going to put in 3/15/22 as the date for the effective date. Between, we're going to come back to the standard fields, and we're going to say between the name of the person who is the buyer. So we'll put we'll leave that blank, because that's going to be the buyer's name there. And we'll put the seller, which is John Morgan. So I'll take the name under seller. Okay. And actually it goes right here because it's the buyer's on the top line. So I'll put the name here for this will populate with John Morgan, but I need to put the buyer's name in there. So I'll use the pre-fill tool, put the name of the buyer here, and this would be Bill Buyer. Okay. There we go. Okay, and the property known as, again, I want to put this in and I don't want anybody to edit this. So I'm going to use the text for the pre-fill tools, and I'll say this is 123 Main Street in Epping. And there we go. And it looks like the PDF that I have has a zip code that's embedded in the version of the PDF that I have. This number is not part of this address. Oh, for all I know, I mean, I don't know if Epping's zip code is 03042. But what we can do here is we can kind of like say, all right, we got a bad PDF here. We got something that we want to kind of not use because that's not right. So we can do a little line out here. And I'm just going to do a line out. In the real world, I wouldn't do this. I would just go get a proper blank PDF and fix that up. Okay. So we'll come down a little bit further. And here, buyer and seller agree to postpone the closing date by X days to accommodate unforeseen circumstances. Again, we don't want people to edit this. So I'm going to put a pre-fill box here and say that this is going to be 10 days. And then here, if checked, buyer and seller agree with notwithstanding blah, blah, blah. We have the option of pre-filling it ourselves or allowing the users to do this. And we do not have the buyer, so we're going to be using this from the seller perspective. So even though we have a buyer and seller on this. So I'll go ahead and bring out a checkbox here, if checked, and I will also bring out a separate checkbox here. Okay. All right. So those two boxes are separate. There's not multiple choices. It's just separate. And if we had other contingencies here for events, we could add information. I'm not going to do that. We don't have the buyer's name yet, but we want to go ahead and put the seller and have them sign. So I'll bring out the signature field here for the seller's signature and the seller's date signed right below it. Okay. This is pretty much all we need on this document. Let's go ahead and send it out again. Boom. It's gone. That's how fast we can do this. Of course, I'm kind of talking in between here. Let me go ahead and switch back over to John Morgan's Gmail. We'll bring him in here and do the signature process, and we'll see what it looks like for John. So here is the document for John. I might as well click allow. And here we go, continue. There we go. So there's the date that we put in there. Here is Bill Buyer, John Morgan, the 123 Main Street. There's our red line. And you can kind of see it here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And down in the checkbox area, you can see there's a little outline around where we placed our checkbox. And we can click that and place a check in those if necessary. If I get to the bottom, I have the date automatically added because we're assuming that this person is going to sign it right now. And when we click sign, they can adopt a signature. You can change styles. You've probably gone through this yourself. We'll do the John Hancock one. There we go. And adopt and sign. And there we are. Okay, we'll go ahead and click finish. By the way, before I click finish here, you guys, are you aware that someone that is signing a document can refuse to sign the document here? And I'm not talking about like not open the document or just throw it away and not sign it. I'm talking about in the other actions area, there is a decline to sign option. Not a lot of people know about this. And, you know, most agents don't discuss it specifically with people. They say, well, you don't want to sign it, so you don't bother sending it. But when someone receives a document, under the other actions, there's a print and sign, assign to someone else, decline to sign, and then some help and support for that particular document. There's also a finish later, which is kind of like getting started, and maybe they want to think about it for an hour or so. Okay. So there is a decline to sign here. I'm going to go ahead and click finish on this, and it's going to send that document back on over to Docusign, and we will close that window, and we're back now at our Docusign room. So we'll refresh this room here. And we now have the PDF version completed and the Please Docusign one. Let's see if we'll give it another quick little refresh here. And we should see signatures coming through here pretty soon. I think that's going to do it. There it is. It's completed. Now, when a document is completed, just kind of more of an envelope kind of thing. When a document is completed, you can click on this to view it and then view documents here. You can do that, but it's kind of a long ways to go to open up a document for viewing, when all you really need to do is once you see it come back here, just go back to the documents area. Don't even bother clicking on this to open it up. Just go back to documents and you're going to see your document in here ready to go. Now, in the case of my documents, these two are the two versions that we sent out for signature. The first one was the bad one, and the second one was the good one. Now, I can see just enough of the red line through that, the zip code that was on this document. I can kind of see that in the thumbnail. You may not be able to see that on the computer screen there, but I can see it here. So I don't need this one, the one that's on the right here. I don't need that. So I can actually archive this or delete it. I'll go ahead and archive it and get rid of it so that it's not in my window here. And then I can see the completed version by clicking on it. And here is the completed version with the signatures and the check boxes. Okay. All right. Lots of good stuff in there. Lots of good little tips, hopefully that you guys can be able to use. Now, one of the things that I want to impress upon you is that PDFs in Docusign can be very tedious. Let's take this change of terms and conditions status update. This one here has, you know, some fields that we can add, and it has information about some checkboxes. And there's a big section here for additional terms and conditions, and then the seller signatures and all that. If you are using PDFs, please consider using forms instead. And I make this plea to you because what happens a lot of times, people don't know how to use the forms, so they fall back on PDFs that they've had on their desktop and they've used before. You now know, if you didn't before, you now know how that you can take a PDF and add fields to it. You also know that it can be kind of tedious and time consuming. But let me give you one of the bigger concerns about using PDFs. And that is down in this case at the very bottom of this document. So here, this is the New Hampshire Association of Realtor, all rights reserved, all other use prohibited, and it has a date of 7/2014. Now, for all I know, and again, there's no claim being made here about the accuracy of this document, but for all I know, there could have been multiple versions of this document released since 2014. But if this is the only version that I have, and it's the only version I've been using, I could technically be out of compliance if there's an updated version of that form available and I should be using it. PDFs has a tendency to get stale very, very fast. Because they're not being managed by NHAR or managed anywhere else, you run the risk of putting a PDF out for a signature that is not the most current. So what I recommend is that anytime you have documents available in the Docusign Forms library, you should absolutely use them from the library. As a matter of fact, let's just double check. Now, I don't know. This could be the last version that was out. This is the change of terms and conditions. Let's go to Docusign Form Library. And under NHAR, we'll say change of terms and conditions. And I'll bring that document in. And let's see. Again, could be the same from 2014 to today, but let's find out if it's been updated. So this is the form version with all of the fields where we can do, and it looks like this document, oh, that's the COVID. Sorry, my bad. That was the COVID. Where is the terms and conditions? There we are. I clicked on the COVID one. Of course it's been updated. All right, here we are. Terms and conditions. There's the same document with all the fillable fields here. Come down to the bottom. And this one does, in fact, have the same date on it. Since it's coming from the Docusign form library, I have confidence that this is the most recent version. Make sure that you're using the most recent version. If you are using a PDF, even if you plan to use the PDF, make sure that you check to see that it is the most recent version of that document. And I know for a fact that a couple of the big important documents have been updated in the past year because the brokers, Jen Vachon and Jason Westcott, have both made comments in the classes for the essential forms, the back to basics, and the contract classes about certain forms being updated. Check with them to make sure that you are in fact using the latest version of any form. If you are running off of a library of PDFs, please take some time to go through that and make sure that you're updated. Other than that, do we have any questions? Looks like we got a couple of people watching there. Got one person, Heather. If you're in the Zoom room and you have any questions, please feel free to ask away. I'll give you a minute to kind of put your thoughts together on that. I'm going to kind of give you a little hint, something to think about here. And we're not going to do this today because I'm probably going to have to develop a special class just for this. But again, I really want to focus on using forms, not PDFs. But if there are certain forms that you need and you want to be able to make them pre-fillable, kind of turn them into a template, turn them into a Docusign form, there is a way that you can do that. And I'm going to put together a little class to show you how to create PDF templates. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, why didn't you start with that, Robert? And again, the focus is not on doing it. The focus is on using forms. But the fact that remains that it's a big wide world and people do things differently. So I will be showing you guys not going to give you a date specific because I don't know when I'm going to do it. But there is a class that I'm working on that will be for PDF form templates. Okay. All right. So no questions. I'm going to let you guys go. Oh, we got a question. How to resend New Hampshire property disclosure for edits. Seller has completed and signed. Now they need to add and revise some info. Okay, so that's a good question, Heather. So the document here that we have that is our signed COVID document, when we open this up, we can see that this is the one that was signed and sent back. We can use this document because it's already signed. One of the things that we have to watch for is if they're going to be making any changes, there needs to be initials if the brokers require it. What I would like to say at the start of this, again, for you, Heather, and for anyone else, is when we're talking about making these changes, we would do them to a document that has the signature so that we don't have to redo the signature all the way through. But you may have to send for initials. And in that case, you can take the same signed document that's completed, right-click it, create another envelope using that signed document. And then you can go and use the line out items. We'll go and bring the room participants back in. We'll bring John Morgan. Add selected here, and we'll click next. We'll take it into the editing window. Now remember, some fields that require updates, if that's the case, you may want to line out the bad information, okay? And then in a text box, add in the updated. Remember, whether you're using a text box that's for you to fill out or a text box that the signer will fill out, you'll need to bring out the correct kind of text box for that particular thing. Now, when you bring out something where they're going to edit or you're going to edit, you may end up needing to pull out an initial field next to that line in particular. Okay. Prefer to reopen whole document because too many edits are needed. Yeah. You can't open, edit, and reassign. Once a signed document comes back, you're just doing, you can only do this, because if you're going to reuse that document, you're going to need to kind of bring out the fields and again, check with the brokers to find out about initials next to changes on the particular documents that you have there. But there isn't an ability to reassign a signed document. The best way to handle that would be to just create a new one. If you need to have someone else sign or change the roles or something like that. If it's something where, you know, seller 1 filled some stuff out, and now you want seller 2 to do all the filling out, you're really changing the roles, and you're better off to go with a new one. Now, we are being a little bit vague here because we're not looking at the specific documents. So just keep in mind that I'm giving you my basic understanding on there. Yes, it is too time consuming to redo, but you have a choice. Do this technique where you're going and changing certain things, or start again. If it's a PDF, it's a very tedious thing. Quick question, Heather, do you have it in a form that you can just redo the form and have new signatures and just kind of clean up the form? Or are we dealing strictly with a PDF?
Let's see. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
And I'm not hearing you if you're talking. Why am I not hearing you?
Can you hear me? No. Why?
Oh.
Unmute.
I see your audio is moving, but I don't hear anything. Okay. No, I can't hear you talking.
Okay.
Not sure why.
My volume's all the way up.
Still can't hear you.
Okay.
I can see your microphone little thing moving, but I don't hear you talking. We should probably connect in a meeting and talk about it, just so that I can make sure that I don't give any bad information or vague information out. So connect with me, Heather, and let's see if we can get this right for you. Okay. And again, I don't want you to have to do any extra work either, but depending on the situation, we'll figure it out. Okay. Okay. Looks like we're good. No, oh, we got to Ann. You hear her, but I can't. Okay, hold on. Maybe I can fix this. Hold on. Anne Marie says she can hear, but I can't. So,
can you guys hear me? My mute is on. My mute is green.
There it is. Now I've got you.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead and restate that, and I'll see if I can answer your question.
Okay, yeah, so they filled out the entire 5 pages of the property disclosure. I noticed there was one section where it says insulation. They didn't check any boxes. That is a required area, I told them, even if you don't know, you need to check unknown. So they do need to go back and edit that. They have told me that it had a septic pump. I said, go ahead and add that information. You didn't say when it was last serviced, but it was serviced a year ago, so you need to add that. There was also some great updates, new carpeting, gas inserts. I said, that's all good information, to fill in. So it's a fair amount of stuff to go in and add, and then start having them initial. The document's going to look like a disaster. And then for them to go back and redo the entire form over again, it's frustrating.
Oh, I understand the frustration. I totally get it. Which one is the lesser of the two evils? Because it's going to have to get updated, right? We have to do something. So technique wise, I would say that the least amount of effort on your part would to be resend and have them refill it. The least amount of effort on their part would be to have updates and initials. But again, this is now you got a messy document. I'm gonna go back to my deferral here. You probably should talk to the brokers on what they feel is the best option, regardless of amount of work, and then whichever one is the best option in their eyes, even if it means more work, that may be the best way to go.
So is there any way, I will do that, thank you. And is there any way we can bring the property disclosure, which is sort of a working document, because things can happen over time where information needs to be updated, and for people to do that 2 or 3 times throughout a listing is just crazy. So if that particular document can be reopened and re-signed, that I think would be great.
Okay, it's the reopen that's the problem. So let's go back and look at the way that this looks in the document area. The reopen is the key word that you're using, and what that implies to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you want to take a form, or no, you don't want to take a form. You want to take something that's signed and you kind of want to convert it back to a form to make proper edits in it, and then have them re-sign. Okay. Unfortunately, Docusign doesn't work that way. And here's the proof of this. We have the signed version of this form for the COVID, and we have the embedded information, and we have the line out, and we have their signature down here. I can't convert this back to a form and carry their signature backward, because if I open the original form that it came from, it's going to be quite literally the blank version. So there's no way to kind of like unbake the cake of a signed document. You can't unbake it. So once a document has been signed and put into the system, it's separated from its form. It's no longer connected ever. And so because of that, your only option is 2 things: work with the signed version and have a mess, or start fresh with this one and then redo it accordingly. So, but you can't kind of like crack open a signed form and then reuse it.
Okay. Thank you.
So at the end of the day, Heather, I understand what you're trying to do is to take something that has data on it and kind of like unpack it and clean it up and reuse it, correct?
Yes. And it's a document that really we need to be able to get back into it so people can make updates and changes without it being a mess. We're not trying to falsify anything or hide anything.
I understand. I totally understand.
Information needs to be added, and then having them re-sign is fine. But when you've got all these initials all over the page, and then, and then when the buyers get a hold of it and they see it for the first time and they sign at the bottom of the page, then there becomes this question: well, should they have initialed where the sellers initialed all those changes? They really got it after those changes. It just becomes a nightmare, honestly.
What would be the perfect scenario? What would you like to see as, like, what would the final product consist of? Would it consist of essentially looking like a new form, all cleaned up and tidy? Or would it be something where there was clearly it had gone through a lifespan and had some changes made to it? Which one do you want?
So it should be all neat and tidy to go out on MLS so that the buyer's agent and the buyers can get a hold of it as a nice, clean updated form. Once you get into the deal, and if there are some changes, okay, then we leave it the way it is. We add the changes, seller's initials, buyer's initial, because we're now in the deal together. That's a whole separate issue. So things could get a little messy there, and that's fine because we're acknowledging something changed. It was,
Sure.
The information was given, everyone acknowledges receipt. But for that mess to be on MLS for the buyers and buyer's agent to see it for the first time ever, so they make an offer, they go and they do the pre-tag roles, so to speak, where a buyer would normally sign and initial. Are they now supposed to then initial all the changes that happened before they ever even saw the form?
Right. Okay.
It's a logistical nightmare.
You know, we're definitely not having an argument. I totally agree with you. I think that my feeling on this is kind of irrelevant, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. My feeling is that you have versions. If we have 4 versions of the property agreement or whatever, the disclosure, if we have 4 versions of those, then we just take those and we continue to archive those until we get to one that is clean and ready to go. Even if it means my buyer or my seller has to fill out this thing 4 times. For the very reasons that you're specifying, you want to have a clean, professional looking document. I believe personally that you should just keep going back to this, filling it out again, and getting it right, closer to perfect every time, and then archive these. And they have to sign, maybe they have to sign 3 or 4 times before you decide to put that copy into the MLS. That's mine.
Signing 3 or 4 times wouldn't be so bad because that's just a few areas, but redoing the document 3 or 4 times becomes an annoyance, and perhaps that client becomes frustrated with you as the agent. Although you're trying to do the most professional job that you possibly can, it doesn't look very professional. And the last thing I want to do is frustrate and annoy my client right at getting started.
So let's take that property disclosure form here for a moment. This is a good conversation, and I may have something that might help. I'm hoping it might. Let's take the property disclosure. So let's go get that. Now, I am in New Hampshire. I don't have any access to the main form, so we're just going to have to do main here, property disclosure. So we'll do residential only. We'll keep it nice and simple. We'll bring this in. Okay. So we bring it in here. Now, one of the things that happens in here is, as we know, in New Hampshire, the buyer needs to, the seller needs to fill these out. That's why they're not visible as editable fields here. So they are not something that we can fill out. The only thing that you as the agent can refill are the property fields here and some of the other little initial fields and stuff like that. So this is one of those forms that doesn't give us the luxury of putting the information in first as a version 1 and then sending it out. Because when we send out this thing, it's basically blank, and you're right, it's blank every time. This is a tough one because you can't pre-fill this information, okay? I will stop just short of giving you tools on what you might do to make that happen. But I want to direct your attention to something. When we were talking about forms that were PDFs, one of the things that we were able to do is those kind of pre-fill areas where we could put those fields in there and kind of fill them ourselves. That was using those pre-fill gray dialog boxes. Those gray dialog boxes are available on forms as well. So in the case of, if you, for example, had to put a second, put a checkbox on something here, you could actually do that and have it kind of done already. And that way, the pre-fill objects kind of stay there. Am I being vague enough?
Yes, but if you add anything, then it should be initial.
Now we're going back into a little bit of a kind of like a recursive moment.
And because this is New Hampshire, I shouldn't be the one filling it out.
Correct.
Versus if this was Maine,
Correct.
you can add stuff. But
Correct.
but yeah, it's.
I know. I don't really have a solution. This is one of those, you get painted into a corner because of the procedure and the mechanics of it.
Yeah, I think this is a great discussion, though, to loop everyone in, Jen and Jason, and maybe even, Jason from compliance, and say, hey, is there something we can do in the future to work on this? Can we work with Docusign in the future to work on this?
Well, that's an interesting question. And the first person that I would ask before we even got any further down the line on that is Jen Vachon, because the buck stops there. And what she says, whether or not, like, even if we technically could, she would be the determiner on whether we can.
Right. I'll be happy to send her an email. After this, and I greatly appreciate all your information and workarounds and how to get things done. It's all great information.
I appreciate the position that you're in, and I completely empathize with the frustration from not only your perspective, but also what we don't want to do to our clients. That's my primary thought always, is how can we make this easy for them? And this is not necessarily easy.
Has anybody else brought up the property disclosure and needing to make edits, or is this the first time?
No, I'm sure that this is not an isolated situation. We've got a few people watching here. I would love to have the people that are in the Facebook chat. Have you guys had this situation where the property disclosure, this particular form, or any form like this, that you send out and then there's, it takes a few versions to get it right. But in this case, you have to keep going back to scratch, or you end up with a messy paper. What are some of the solutions that you guys have come up with? So, if you're in the chat on Facebook, put an answer in there if you've encountered this particular situation, or just your general feedback. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Okay. All right. So we are at 12. We are done here with this particular one. The main thing here that I want to impress upon you is there is also, and this is, it's kind of sort of in a weird kind of connected way to our discussion here, Heather, where, one of the tools that is available to us is we can make PDF templates, but it doesn't mean that we're trying to override the system. It just means that if we have PDFs, we can convert's a bad word. We can work with them and create templates from PDFs where it is proper to do so. And that's, like I said, a class that I'll be working on. It sort of ties in, but I don't want to connect it directly to it because I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining me here at 1 o'clock. In about an hour, we're going to be going on to Command 101, and we're going to be talking about the process of offers and commissions. And then remember, at 3 o'clock today, we're going to be doing a special class for productivity tips on PC. Last week we did the Mac. At 3 o'clock today, we're doing the PC, and we'll be focusing on Windows 11. And you're actually going to see me using Windows. Crazy, I know. So we'll see you then. Remember that you can always get in touch with me by the information that's kind of floating across the bottom of the screen there. It's been going this whole time. Hopefully you had a chance to write that down. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in a little bit. Thanks. Take care.